Kathleen. Thank you.
Just wanted to make sure we're
Can you
recording.
guys hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Is this
Yes.
presentation going to be recorded in case I lose you?
Yes.
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 Okay, so if I drop out, I will watch the video.
No
Okay.
problem.
Okay.
Thank you, Scott. All right,
Thank
roll
you.
call. Mayor Jacobs,
I am here.
Committeeman Hickey,
Here.
Mr. Strakoff,
Online.
Mr. Travellini,
Here.
Mr. Rodelius,
Present.
Mr. Leonard,
Here.
Mr. DiGiovanni,
Present.
Mr. Zupnik,
Present.
Mr. Walter,
I'm here.
Chairwoman Gutschall.
Here.
Okay, an echo.
Adequate
Yeah,
notice of this
somebody-
meeting of the Adequate notice of this meeting of the Bedminster Township Land Use Board was filed with the Township Clerk and sent to the Bernardsville News and the Courier News and to all subscribers, and posted at the Township Municipal Building, 1 Miller Lane, Bedminster, New Jersey, on January 16th, 2020.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, we have the flag behind you.
Yes, we do.
Okay. I pledge allegiance
To the flag.
Flag
to the flag
of the United States of America,
of America and to the republic for which it stands,
and
One nation,
Nation.
under God, indivisible,
with liberty
And
justice
For
for
all.
all.
All
A
right.
little better, a little
was
better.
that was still pretty bad.
By the time we get done another year, we'll have it down.
Oh, really? Oh, don't say that.
No, I hope not. Oh, God, no, please. All right, we have minutes from August 6th. You had an opportunity to look at those minutes, and do we have a motion?
I move to approve the minutes as written.
Anybody second?
Seconded.
That was Scott?
Yeah.
yes, it was.
Okay. Okay, minutes, anyone opposed or abstain? The minutes are approved. We also have a resolution from Rycott. Has everyone had an opportunity to review that and read it?
I have read it, and I just had a little question. It may be something
Go ahead,
that I don't understand. It
Nick.
seems
Okay,
a lot of description about the evolution of the commission. You know, first there was all this description about the, what was that, the annex or the thing up. And then the next described that it wasn't there anymore. I thought it would just skip all the other, attempts and then just describe what was finally approved. Am I out of line when I think it should be written that way or what?
Tom, you want to talk about that? I'm not quite sure what I
Yeah.
understand.
I think I understand. We could change it, Nick, but I was trying to reflect in the resolution the fact that it came in one way and went out another way.
Huh.
And I especially wanted to make sure that we dealt with that the pergola is not approved, and without explaining that it was initially proposed, why. It wasn't so easy to explain why it was removed by the board, even if others try to say it's a good idea. It's not acceptable. So I don't think it's unusual to explain the prior presentation, but if you feel strongly and other board members want to remove part, we can do that. We could come back next week with it too.
I think it's certainly accurate and certainly reached the conclusions that I recall we reached. So I'm happy with it as it is. It just seemed a little, it was a little longer than it might have been if we didn't go
Right.
the history of what
I
happened.
also, by the way, wanted to make sure we talked about the doctor's objection next door, and he wasn't there on the second hearing, so I
Mhm.
didn't want to ignore that, and that is a condition that they have to pave their parking
Good
lot
pave,
and do all
right.
the good full stormwater management per Paul, and
Right.
they agreed to
That's
that.
correct. No, I'm fine with it as it is. I was sort of trying to see what's the norm for this kind of thing, and I think you've explained that. Thank you.
Okay, so do we have a motion to approve?
I'll do that. Motion to approve it.
A second?
Second.
Jeff seconded.
Mhm.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone abstain? Okay,
You don't
motion.
do that as a roll?
Oh, yeah, we do as a roll. Yes. You're right, Jeff. Yes. Yeah, so Janine, you want to roll call?
Mayor Jacobs?
Colin and I are not eligible.
Yeah,
That was-
right.
Oh, I'm sorry.
They abstain.
Mr. Strackoff?
Aye.
Mr. Travellini? Mr. Rodelius?
Aye.
Mr. Leonard?
Aye.
Mr. DiGiovanni?
Aye.
Mr. Zepnik? I saw your voice, Scott. And Mr. Walter?
Aye.
Chairwoman Gotcha.
Aye. Motion is approved. Okay, are there any public comments? Something that is not on the agenda tonight? Don't see anything? No? We'll close that portion. Okay. Paul, I guess we need a completeness review
For what?
for Lamington Farm Golf.
I thought we previously had done that.
Oh, we have.
Yes, we
Okay,
already
I
did
didn't
that.
know.
Yes, and it was deemed complete subject to the submission of the digital plan, which they have submitted since then, and the application is scheduled for next week.
Okay, we had it on the agenda again then. So, okay, so we're scheduled for next week.
Correct.
Okay, good. Okay, I guess we're ready for Frank for our master plan amendment. Frank, you there?
Frank?
Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes, we can hear you.
I'm sorry, I was waiting for the drum roll.
Oh, sorry. No
okay.
trumpets.
That was the thunderstorm in the background of my house, Frank.
Okay. Thank you, Paul. What I'd like to try to do tonight is get the board acquainted with the concept that we're going to work through over the next several months in order to determine how we treat this portion of Pluckerman that we're talking about planning something different for. And I think the board has talked about it enough that I don't need to go back to ground zero. But a couple of things that need to be referenced here are the township committed in its affordable housing plan and settlement with Fair Share Housing Center to provide 28 family rental affordable units, and to do so either by zoning for them by June 30th of next year, or by arranging to build them and find the financing for them ourselves if we didn't do that. We're fortunate that we found ourselves in a position where the elite application offered us the first 5 of those units. And I think as we look at gauging development in Pluckerman to the site that's available, there are going to be 2 different ways that the board's probably going to look at it. And I would encourage you to explore them both carefully. On the one instance, it'll be the physical area that could be developed and how much you might fit and feel comfortable about and like the looks of. On the other hand, you might think that if we got 5 of the 28 units and we only need 23, and we know that you can multiply by 6 more or less with a 15% set aside. So we multiply by that number and that's all we ever want to see on that site. That's certainly a position that the town could justify taking, and I'm not going to argue against that. I think I would argue, though, that the next time around, even though we have 600 odd extra COA units, that means that we've done more than very, very many of the towns that have ever been involved in this stuff. Nonetheless, we're still going to have another family rental obligation that comes up next time. And that's 2025. And I know that seems far enough down the road that you won't have to listen to me talk about it again. But the truth is, if you plan ahead now, and if developers do it for you, you're ahead of the curve instead of behind the curve. So I would much prefer over time, as we have this conversation, that we think more about what's our vision for what we would create here. How can the traffic impacts and other impacts be managed, modified, modulated? What improvements can be made that make it better than it is now? Because we all know we have a problem there now. If all we do is add more traffic into that problem, obviously that's not good. But we're also going to be in a discussion ultimately with a developer where we're going to ask them to do something in the way of road improvements, maybe physical, but certainly things that will require DOT to allow them to change the timing of the signal and maybe change the signals out. And as they're doing that, we're going to be hoping, and I think we're going to be requiring, if Tom and I can agree that's the thing we can do legally, that they're going to pay all the costs associated with making these improvements, even though under the law, they would not necessarily have to be so heavily engaged. It's not uncommon for a town that says, you're trying to do something in a bad spot. If you can't fix the bad spot, we're not going to let you do it. And I don't think that's even unfair, but there are provisions in the land use law that would not necessarily provide that you could require all of this, especially of an inclusionary developer. So as we try to figure out what we want to get out of the developer, if there were no inclusionary housing, you'd be looking at everything you could possibly benefit from, but we're not in that same climate. So I think we've had the initial conversations that let us be pretty comfortable that the developer understands what needs to be done here and is not going to object to the fact that he might have to do more than what might be his fair share. And I think that that's an important part of this conversation, because as much as this can be a great thing for the village, there might be other places it could happen too. It's not as though it has to happen here. I like the fact that we're ahead of the curve. And so by next June, we can easily have this all buttoned up. But I think the important part now is not tonight to decide, yeah, let's go do this, but it's to look at the concept that we're talking about and to flesh it out enough over the next couple of months where we are all very comfortable that that would make Pluckerman a better place. So if we start to go through my memo, which I'm not going to try to do in painful detail for you all, I'll touch on a couple of high points because I think those are the things that we need to recognize about where the way forward is here. I mentioned the settlement agreement and the fact that we got 5 of the 28 units from Elite. I made references in my memo to the southern portion of the KRE site, and every time I said southern, it should say northern, and I'll correct that in the ultimate documentation here. But the northern portion of the site, the portion that's generally undeveloped between the two banks, is the area that's proposed for this mixed-use development, which is basically intended to have retail and office use on the first floor and residential use on any upper floors. We've talked in the past about the fact that if you look at Pluckerman, if you go up and down Route 206, the Revolutionary era development pretty much filled both sides of the road with all kinds of interesting buildings. And for whatever reason, it did the same thing on the north side of Burnt Mills Road, but maybe those buildings were all removed and I just don't know it. But the south side of Burnt Mills Road doesn't have a streetscape. So we are evolving a streetscape for the village here. And it's going to be important that what you do makes you really, when you drive by it, I want you to feel great that we figured out how to do something that attractive and useful for the village. So we're going to amend the land use element and the land use map so that both the OR and the ORV zones down in Pluckerman, and I apologize for my horrible map here. Joanna is away like Terry is, so I threw that together. It'll be a lot nicer looking when we give you the real version. But in any event, part of what's interesting here is this is a site that's blessed with a lot of access. We not only have the frontal access, that will be important, but it's also near the intersection, so we want to manage that carefully. And it has the backside access opportunity that can get people in and out of this part of town without necessarily having to go through the traffic light. We've talked with the developer about the fact that there would be structured parking involved for them to be able to eliminate parking, build buildings, and still have enough parking for both the housing and the offices. So it won't just be a sea of parking when they're done, but of course we have to control that with the standards we use for coverage. Those significant improvements that we're talking about may be more than just signal timing on the traffic light. And I think it's really going to be up to the traffic experts, ours and theirs, to reconcile what DOT will approve that makes things better. Because it's very easy for me as a layperson to say, geez, if you just took this thing out of there or put something else there, things would work much better. But at the end of the day, you know, I just think we probably need to really be guided by the experts on that one. So the land use plan element would make a description of what it is we're doing in this district, this new district, and override the existing zoning, leave the things that are currently permitted in the OR and the ORV, but then also add these additional uses and give it a new name. The second part of the memo addresses the fact that we're also going to amend the housing element and fair share plan, because we now know we're not going to guess where are we going to find these 28 units. We're going to say in our plan that the 28 to be provided are going to be provided on both the elite, where we already know we have them, and on a site that we've just identified at Bedminster 1 that meets all of the COA site suitability criteria. It's got water and sewer. It's available, developable. It does what it needs to do for us to be able to have that be something fair share housing center will look at and say, yep, that's all believable. And again, I made reference to the southern portion of KRE, and it's really the northern portion. But I described how it meets all of those approvable, available, developable, and suitable criteria. And it's not close. We definitely know that this is a site. We're now demonstrated for the record when we make the amendment to the housing element that, yes, we promised to do this. Here's how we said we thought we would do it. And now here's how we're going to do it. So those two documents together, when we get to the end of this discussion about how to do it best, are the things that the planning board will be asked to have a public hearing on and adopt either before the end of the year or early next year. And I'm happy to go into any more detail that the board members might like to. I thought maybe the 40,000 foot level discussion for tonight might be a useful launch pad. So I'll listen now.
Frank, couple of questions for you. So I got the map that was attached to the memo, and then you sent a separate map, correct?
The only map that you should be worrying about is that separate map, which if it wasn't the one you saw in the memo, it should have been, but it's the one with the sloppy yellow lines around both the OR and the ORV.
So the new zone is
All of
defined
that.
by the sloppy yellow line.
Yes, exactly.
All right, so even though part of it is green and part of it is blue, the entire area.
Yeah, if Joanna had done the map, you wouldn't see green or blue. You just see the whole area in the same color because it would be a new zone. And that's what we will do ultimately.
Okay, and I think I asked this question a couple months back, but I forgot. What is the Timberbrook zone described as?
It's got a multifamily nomenclature and a density that goes with it because it was designed for an inclusionary development. I don't remember without looking at the ordinance, but it's a separate zone from Verizon and everything else around it.
But but even where Timberbrook is, isn't there some office uses that frontage on Washington Valley Road?
In front of it, yes. Yes, there are. But that's a different zone. That's part of the OR, that's probably just the village zone. I'd have to go back and look VN.
Yeah, Timberbrook property itself is a zone in and of itself. It's a separate zone on that boundary alone.
Oh, okay. Okay. So the office piece is separate from the Timberbrook zone entirely.
Yes. It looks like it's in VN, like the office looks like it's in VN. It may have pre-existed the zoning or something like that, but basically it's office in one zone, multifamily in the other. And I like what we're proposing here because we deal with the total tract, and we don't really want to change anywhere else relative to this this property. And I like having the entire tract in the zone for the very reason that I use it to justify the nexus that this development will have to the intersection, which will, in my opinion, because of the substantial frontage on both 202, 206, and Burnt Mills Road, and the ability to compel the public access to the upgraded bypass driveway, that we will be able to require the improvements at the intersection as part of this site plan, and if there is a subdivision. We will, though, of course, be focusing in on details of the zoning ordinance to make sure that the mixed-use development and the residential portion are focused and locused by Burnt Mills Road, and that the parking is adequate. Will also be, there's a lot of existing impervious coverage, so there may not be an increase in impervious coverage. There probably will be some, but whatever happens as to drainage will have to be adequate, and stormwater management will have to be adequately addressed on the entire site by the applicant. And Paul will be checking all that, and we'll have to, if it requires any additional stormwater systems, they'll have to develop those. So I would not recommend looking further than this tract. And this, by the way, this tract is in two zones: ORV by Burnt Mills Road, and OR to the back or to the south. So that's why it has blue. The blue and the green are the two different zones, I think. I think it's good planning to focus our attention on this Mount Laurel zoning option or requirement on this tract. But there are other ways to do things, but I like the idea of focusing on the entire tract.
Okay.
Can we, for the moment,
Follow up with,
Let me just, Janine, if you could enable share screen, because I've asked Paul to pull up an aerial so that everyone can see the site, and that Paul can, and with Frank, we can look both not just at the aerial, but at the proposed zoning map that Frank has prepared.
Tom, I think you addressed where my questioning was going, which is basically, if we think this is such a good idea, what we're doing on the, southwest corner of that intersection, why wouldn't we change the zone for Timberbrook and the, office zone in front of it to be more inclusive like this one?
Yeah, good question. And the main reason I would say is because even if you go to look at that area, you should do different things, because we are focused on needing at least the 23 affordable units. And we have vacant or reusable portions of this property, namely the bank and the parking by Burnt Mills Road, which we would not have at those other properties. And I think what happens in Mount Laurel zones and inclusionary zones in general, especially ones where you're trying to amend the housing element, is it's an interesting necessity to focus in on the details of the particular properties that you try to change zoning for, to both require and encourage the mandatory set aside of affordable units, and to focus in on how to make sure that it just like Frank said, that it has the vision and the view that you want. And it's hard to do that with multiple properties at the same time. I think it's good, especially with Mount Laurel, to focus on the particular property. And we get great discretion in Mount Laurel litigation and the doctrine to do that.
All right, thanks.
Anybody else on the board have any questions? Nick,
Nick, you're muted.
you need to unmute. There you go. Go ahead, Nick.
I thought we were going to show a map, though.
We are.
They're working on it.
Paul's getting back on, and he's going to share a screen.
Okay, but we can go on with other things right now.
Go on with other things.
So,
Well, this is the discussion right now. This is what we're talking about. So if anybody has any questions, the board have any more?
I wanted to ask Frank on page 4 of the ordinance. I was confused by that note because it went on into trading areas from here to there. I kind of lost the trend of what that note was about. Or is this just some boilerplate that's always attached?
I've got to get to where you are. I apologize, Nick. Just give me a second because somehow I managed to lose the document while we're talking about it. Can you tell me what you're referring to on it? On page 4?
Well, I just got confused, reading the thing. The developer may increase square footage. I mean, what's the intent here? I guess we're giving the developer some kind of flexibility, but I don't quite understand what that is for. Or
Frank, you look at your note number 2. When you're talking about floor area ratio and lot coverage.
Are you in the ordinance, you mean?
Yes.
Oh, I'm
Yes.
sorry. I'm looking at the master plan memo. Sorry. That's my fault. Let me just go back up and grab that.
And also,
Page
while
4.
we're on that same page, Frank has built in some question marks regarding front yard minimum. So there's obviously some discussion points that we'd have to get into how do we envision, as earlier, we proceed with this, we're looking at creating a streetscape where none presently exists. There's been there's open for discussion, the front yard minimum. So rather than having a big, asphalt parking lot before you hit the building, creating more of a neighborhood streetscape consistent with the rest of Plaquemine, where the houses and the buildings are relatively closer to the street. So I
think the mayor has really zoned in on exactly the issue, because you're either going to see a double row of parking, which when you add up all the numbers together, the 24-foot aisle and the 2 18-foot rows, there's 60 feet of blacktop. If you put some kind of 15-foot or 30-foot buffer in front, you can just add that. So now we're 100 feet back from the road. And I think, if I understand what Larry's saying, you're going to compare that to whether it's realistic or not. What's your vision? Suppose that building were on a sidewalk, where as you walk down the street, you walk right into those retail uses. That would be the opposite version of it. Would be more in line with what the state plan has envisioned. But mixed use is also a very important thing to the state plan, no matter where it comes from. But I do think that those two, you need to help us figure out if your vision for this is such a walkable place that you walk down the sidewalk and walk right into a shop, or do you drive your car to the parking lot and park there?
So, but I believe that Nick's particular point, if you look at your note number 2.
I'll help
Yes.
with that. I'll help with that. So this is a draft ordinance, Nick, and that note is picking up on a note in the ORV, I think, zone that exists now on that property. And we're not settled yet on the floor area ratio or even that note. So that's referring to the floor area ratio note. And the existing zone ORV, I believe, has a certain way to increase your floor area ratio if you donate land in the village neighborhood zone to open space. I don't I don't have any back history to give you of when it was ever exercised. I'm not even sure if it was exercised
I don't know that
ever.
it ever was.
And,
Or is there
Right.
any, is there
and
any space here?
no, well, there is some riparian buffer and very limited. That being said, that chart of the standards, we need to fine tune more. And that note needs to be fine tuned more. And we will be working with you over the few months to be doing those details. Right now, we're in a workshop about a draft, but that note happens to be very similar to language to a note in the existing, I'm pretty sure, ORV zone. So, and which this property is in, part of this property is in. So I didn't want to like mess up something that could have existed in the existing zoning. I want to try to mesh it if it makes sense in this development. I also want to tell you that a lot of these details we want to work on. I also want to work with you and Rich Travellini and board members about architectural design, and we want to be well done the way you want it to be done. So we'll be working on that, and there are other details of that chart that we will have to work on with Paul and Frank and you as board members.
Very good.
I think in the course of these discussions, you're going to need to see some imagery of the contrasting kinds of things that I mentioned to you, and not one that makes one look really good and the other look really bad, but sort of the best looking versions of either right on the sidewalk or 2 rows back in parking, and see what kind of things really resonate, because excellent architecture really needs to be one of the most important things that we insist on here, I think everybody agrees with that.
Frank, because this is in the village zone, are we going to ask any recommendations from the historical commission? Because of the design and the architecture?
I think it would be prudent to, yeah, certainly because it's in the village, they have a review function, but it might be more useful to talk to them ahead of time about what they see their role as, because this is going to be all new development. And we've mentioned in the past that our job, yes. Our job is
I don't know about the rest of you, but I, for one, if this is in the village, a mini little strip center that's, set back 40 feet from the roadway is not what I'm envisioning. I'm more towards the latter, Frank, that you described as you're, walking down the street and you're walking in and out of a shop, or you're maybe even walking, into a door upstairs to your apartment.
Right.
That's
and there's plenty of room
I have in the back of my head here.
There's all kinds of room behind the building to make up for all of this with parking and amenity space and everything. So it's not as though it's being jammed into a postage stamp. I think you're right that if we look at it that way, that's really, I think I'll bring forward some things for the board to consider in terms of built images of other places. And we can talk about what resonates with you, because it's really your town, you have to figure that out.
So what I'd like to do now, Paul, if you can go to share screen, and I also have on my screen if we actually go through the ordinance for the memo, I've got it up, but I think right now let's
Can I ask a real quick question?
Yes, go right ahead, Ann.
Share screen. You're still going to talk through it, but
I'll talk over your share screen.
There you go.
Frank, I apologize if I missed it. I dialed in a little late. I know we're talking about that whole parcel that borders Burnt Mills, sort of from the drive that's predominantly the KRE site. Are the banks that are on Burnt Mills part of the KRE site? Are they going to be redeveloped, or are we assuming that at some point?
The driveway to Chase that comes way back away from the intersection has an easement across the KRE property for most of its length. Okay. And the other bank that's down by the Loop Road is on the KRE property.
Bank of America.
So they will remove that bank as part of this proposal.
So Anna, if you look at the screen, Paul is actually showing the 2 different banks.
Yeah, this one here is the Bank of America that's on the KRE property. This is the Chase on the corner, Here's the access easement. This is the mixed-use commercial building. Here's the car wash.
Mhm.
Those three properties are separate from the KRE property, which kind of wraps around them.
Yeah, lot 7 is everything behind all of them, all the way down around the loop road.
Hey, Paul, would you maybe show in with your pointer, approximately the area where things would change and be a mixed use area with some residential and maybe
I think we're talking about this area up here along Burnt Mills Road. And the question in the discussion before was, is it on the road? Is there parking in the front? How does that all happen? This is the large parking field in the rear.
Some of which they will cannibalize for this development and then replace with structured parking.
And I would not expect this photo was taken on a work day based on this parking lot down below.
No, just during COVID, Paul.
This could be a COVID photo.
Very
the
recent.
new world. Paul, why don't you show a little bit of where the bypass driveway is now and how it might become a public access drive or road.
Sure. Get out of this, but if you follow my cursor down here, this is where the access road comes in. These parcels here are part of Burnt Mills Park. You can see the ball field there, but the road comes down, passes a sanitary sewer pumping station here, swings around past the parking, and comes out to 202, 206, just north of the bridge under 78.
So that theoretically would become a public access private road, some upgrading that would provide right turn in and right turn out, right turn in from Burnt Mills Road, right turn out onto 202, 206. Now, I don't think a left turn out onto 206. But it helps provide some vent for traffic and the shift, splitting of traffic.
If you look at the intersection now, down here, you can see it's a right in, right out only. So the current configuration does not allow a left-hand turn onto 202, 206 north.
So for Anna, who lives on Burnt Mills Road, she's going to Bridgewater, she could use that public.
This is Anna Drive coming down here.
My own personal road? Well, that's lovely.
Don't ask for that. You have to maintain it.
Anna, you just made Tom very nervous.
Anyone else? Anybody else have any questions regarding what we're talking about here on the
That's a quick question. Paul, is that the body of water on there? Is that some kind of a retention basin?
It's an on-stream detention basin that was done as part of this project when it was known as, it was originally a corporate bank building.
But that's a tributary to Chambers Brook.
Yes.
Like Paul said, it's on stream, which really you would ever see them let you do now, but back then they did.
Okay.
And any new detention would have to be separate from that.
Okay.
Okay, anybody else from the board? I'll open it up to the public if any public.
If we could also, I mean.
I have a question.
I'm going to move.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Lou. Yes, Lou. Go right ahead.
I have two questions for Frank. Frank, is there a specific deadline that all of this has to be finished at? And we've talked about doing this over the next several months. Hopefully we can get to a point where we can actually get into a public session where we're all together and go over this. But what's the timeline on this?
According to the settlement, the rezoning that we agreed to do would occur before the end of June next year. And failing to do that, we have the opportunity then to finance and develop a 100% affordable project of what would have been 28, now 23 units. So all of these pieces should be fully executed and approved by the court before next June, which is why I said we're looking to be able to come to some conclusions before the end of the year or around the beginning of the, the first quarter. But I think right now, mostly what we need, the last time anybody envisioned what Pluckerman was going to be, it was 80 or 90 separate families, each building a little tiny house back in the 1700s. So this is the next big opportunity to have a vision for the place. And I think we ought to figure out something that we could really always look back proudly at and say, yeah, we grew it in a good way.
A follow-up question to your point there. We talked about architecture and historic commission, but when we're writing up these zoning ordinance, can we zone architecture?
This is Tom now, and the answer is yes, in my opinion, you can, as long as you do it in objectively measurable words and methods. And sometimes you can and do use pictures. So that being said, we'll be working on that with you and with Frank and Paul, and
okay.
We'll be seeking, you have to define it in objective ways, not subjective ways, but there are things you can do in zoning.
You can't do something like say it needs to look pretty. But you can say it needs to be brick, pitched roofs, certain articulation on the building, and those sorts of things.
There need to be measurable
We could
standards,
take
right,
that
Paul?
Paul, we could take that a step further and include some of the visioning that that Frank was talking about, with respect to gable roofs and porches.
Absolutely.
Or what looks like porches and balconies and whatever the heck,
Right.
and really, and give that visioning that we are planning on to KRE to execute to some degree, with some, some room for interpretation for sure, but we can get pretty finite with this. No, Frank?
Absolutely, Rich. And the thing is, unless we try to prescribe something to them, the more guidance we can give them about what you'd like to see, the better job they can do of adapting that to something that they can build. So I think it's a great idea.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
One thing I would like to mention, because I just have to say it because I keep thinking about this. This was KRE, and before that it was Bedminster One, but the bank I was thinking of was actually City Federal. That was the original developer of the property.
Oh.
I knew it would come back to me sooner or later.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Hey,
what's
Paul,
happening
Paul,
with
you know
Bank
you're
of
old.
America?
You know you're old when you feel like you've got to tell everybody that,
I know. I can say that it
I must
preceded
be-
me, though.
I must be young, because I didn't even know that. But I'm older.
What's happening with Bank of America? Is that moving or just going away, or do we know?
They'll tear it down. Well, we don't know. The owner will tear it down and build the KRE would the owner, and they would tear it down and build these buildings. Maybe they'll put it into the new buildings.
Yeah.
We
I think
don't
they're
do-
thinking it slips into the mixed-use building,
Oh, okay.
which is very troubling because I don't think our vision for the mixed-use building has a drive-through on the end of the building.
Okay.
But maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, that bank does do a lot of drive-in businesses. I actually go there myself.
Oh, yeah, I
They
know.
have 2 ATMs.
They wouldn't relocate without it.
Yeah.
But in answer to Lou's question, Paul and I did a start on the architectural standards in the draft ordinance. It's just a start, and we need the board, and so we need everybody to work on it together to improve upon that. Okay.
So there's something that that Frank and I had discussed, and it follows up on Rich's thought, that if there are examples of architecture or way buildings fit in this type of neighborhood zone, if you've take a photo, or if you see some other drawing, send it over to Frank or Paul or Tom or Janine.
Yeah,
and
good idea.
put it across the board.
Yeah, we'll put them all together so we can look at all this stuff. I think that's a really good idea, Larry.
And you know what, Larry, what I can do too is I can talk to a couple of the architects that I'm dealing with and see if they have some representative projects, you know, with, you know, a couple different applications that we can get a sense of, even if it's just renderings, even if it's stuff that never made it, you know, to a shovel and mound. But even if there's like some renderings and such, Jeff, you may have some access to that
I'm gonna
kind
dig
of
around, yeah. Mhm,
right?
Definitely. Mhm.
So if we've got, you know, access to architects who've, you know, prepared plans, I can probably get some of these things without any expense, I'm hoping. But, you know, even if it's just a rendering, I think it'll help us envision what we might be able to achieve there.
I think you're right.
Sounds great.
Yeah, I think that's a very good idea, to just so that we can visualize it and see what it is, with the parking lot in the front, with parking without the parking, so it's up
Right.
against the streetscape. I think that's a good idea, and it'll give us a better vision. Mhm.
Yeah.
So I guess that's where we're at next. What should we do with this, Tom? Is there anything you want to do
Okay.
with this particular amendment right now?
No, not, I like everything.
Take it home and
I
read it.
like all the- Right, keep reading it, give us, you know, call me or Frank or give us ideas. I did want to say that this was a workshop. This is not a, you know, public hearing on a draft master plan or an ordinance. We're at the preliminary stage of discussions of a draft. That's planning. It's great opportunity for you, the board, and the public. That's also, that's to be said. The important thing to know is that we wouldn't even reach a point where there would be a public hearing on the master plan amendment until this board directs me and Paul that it's ready for a noticed public hearing, at which time there would be a document that was considered for an amendment. We're not there yet, and we need a number of months of
So
working.
red line questions and comments are welcome at this point then, right, Tom?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, the
And
one thing,
pictures,
Tom,
I think pictures and elevations that of things you like, that's
Mhm.
fantastic. I'm maybe one of the rare attorneys, but I believe you could put a picture in an ordinance. I certainly know you can put it in the master plan, and you can cross-reference the master plan with your ordinance. So
Mhm.
you know, if you know something you really like, let's hear about it. Okay.
Tom, I think we just want to caution the board, like you always do, that we don't want to have any kind of interpretation of our emails as a meeting of the board members. So as was suggested, if someone's going to send photos to any one of us, pick one of us, Paul or I, whoever, and maybe we should do that right now, and then send it to us, and we can easily disseminate it to everybody without running the risk that we're cross-communicating in a way that could be trouble.
Right. Don't send it as a group email or even a majority email. Okay. Just emails to the professionals, or, you know, and it's, if you put it to me, it's real, and you say attorney-client privilege communication, that adds further protection, but we don't use email, as you all know, for, you know, multi-member discussions or quorum discussions. Okay.
Okay.
It's tempting to just say reply all, but we have to focus on our public meetings like this for our group things.
Okay. Any further comments about this before we get on to the next? No? Good. Any board comments? Anything?
Madam Chairman, it's
Yeah.
not required. I'm sorry, it's Tom Collins. It's not required, but, and I think you sort of almost started to open it up. I don't tell you that you have to open it up to the public, but if we didn't, and it's sometimes a courtesy to open it up to the public and talk about what we just talked about and anything else they want to talk about tonight.
Mhm.
But that's up to you as the chair. And you.
Well, I did
decide.
open it up if to the public, if anyone has anything to say. I think,
okay.
yes, Bill, go right ahead. Mhm.
All right. Thank you. I appreciate it. I actually didn't come here for this particular item, but I would say I'm Bill Kibler from Raritan Headwaters. We have 38 municipalities in our watershed, and I'm always impressed by the level of visioning that I see happening in Bedminster, especially at the land use board here. So good for you. The one comment I had is I wonder if or perhaps a suggestion would be if the board might consider including language in the master plan as you're amending it, requiring, or at the very least strongly preferring, green stormwater infrastructure approaches for developments or for the development in this zone and other zones. But since this
Bill,
is looking at it now.
I'm sorry, Bill, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but that green infrastructure, currently the DEP adopted new regulations in the last 6 months or so, and we have until March to adopt those new green infrastructure requirements that would be applicable to all projects. So I'm currently working on that ordinance that I will be referring to the governing body, which will come back through the planning board before it gets adopted, but that absolutely will be part of this.
Somehow I knew Bedminster would be on top of it. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Bill.
Okay, thanks. Okay, any further comments? Okay, we'll close it to the public then. I'll open it to the board. The board have any comments? Mayor?
So as you guys all remember, or may remember, we've been working with Somerset County in hiring a consultant to further the planning investment growth study that was done a few years ago looking at the AT&T campus. And a consultant has been selected and a contract was issued from Somerset County to Michael Baker International. The county and Michael Baker are in the throes, or hopefully the final throes, of working out the consulting contract, and the planning kickoff should start within a few weeks, maybe next week. Originally, we had anticipated that we would have a kickoff meeting with Michael Baker's team this week, but with the contract not being executed, that did not happen. But I did tell the county that I thought it would be a good idea for at least the county reps from the planning department and with Frank and Tom and Colin and I to talk through at least some of the sort of precepts of where we see the planning study going, so that when we do have the discussions with Michael Baker, that we're laying down some ground rules. We had that conversation that was on Tuesday morning. I don't get my bearings on days. That was Tuesday. So that was Tuesday. And I think we've got a good sense, and the county has a good sense of prioritization on the AT&T campus, what it could be, right? I mean, right now, AT&T has not indicated it's leaving, but we do have to be prepared that if AT&T does leave or diminishes its presence at the site, that we are not left flat-footed going, geez, what the heck happened? Oh man, our biggest rateable, our biggest building in town just left, and with the number of jobs with it as well. And I'm not going to let that happen to Bedminster. So we are going to be working to fully anticipate that if AT&T reduces its presence or leaves, that there's a plan in place that is something that Bedminster Township can support and can move rapidly to repopulate that property, and to do so in a way that envisions not just our needs today, but our needs moving forward. As everyone is familiar, and I hate to do this to Paul again, but if you can do a share screen and perhaps pull up an aerial of the AT&T campus. For those who haven't been into it, it's certainly the largest building we have in Bedminster, but the way it's situated is remote. And unless you've been there, you really don't even know what it looks like. You may see it from 78. You'll certainly see the entrance on 202, 206, but you really don't have a sense of what it is like there until you actually, see an aerial or you've been through it. So we need to be prepared. It is an isolated site. It's got the bridge off of 202, 206. That's the only way in and the only way out. And there's a guard shack along the access road. So it is not a publicly accessible property. And if this becomes something different, if it becomes a multi-tenant facility, then we will have the access certainly the opportunity to open it up to the public. It's on the other side of the Raritan River, and yes, the other side of the North Branch, at least in this section, is still Bedminster. It's got a number of preserved areas and undevelopable portions along the North Branch. And Paul, I'm not sure if you can demonstrate that with the.
Yeah, this is the river coming down through here. These lighter areas are the two parking garages. This is the original building. This is the new network operations center. Here's the access that comes in. Here's the entrance, and then the two exits to 202, 206 northbound and southbound.
Paul, is there any approved building sites there besides?
No, they're maxed out on their floor area ratio right now.
I thought they had another building, another pod that had not yet been constructed.
I'm trying to think. There may have been something relatively small over in here, but it was not a big structure.
Yeah, I thought, so the building is essentially right now, you've got 4 pods. Those, yep, as you zoom in, there you go. So you've got the network operating center right there. And then you've got buildings A, B, and C. And each of those buildings is about a little over 200,000 square feet. So in total, they're about 800, just shy of 900,000 square feet of office. And I was under the impression that they had another of those pods approved but not built.
Nothing this big. I think there might have been a smaller building over in here, but it really wasn't very significant if I recall properly.
Okay, I just remember at some point someone talking about at least 100 to 200,000 square feet, but maybe that's not the case. So, this could be something important for Bedminster. And, the discussions we had at the county are current trends, as it's getting harder and harder to find single user corporations who want 1 million square feet. I'm not sure if any of you have any in your Rolodex right now. If you do, that'd be great to have.
Have them call me if you do.
But if it's going to be multi-tenant, if it's going to be something that's going to work within the employment base that we already have, right? So what is the talent pool in northern Somerset County? Well, it's professional, it's high tech, it's pharma, it's engineering. So perhaps we will focus on potential future uses, looking at those type of sectors and how we can repurpose this building, if it ever comes to that, to fit the needs of those sectors. So that's something that we had a very positive discussion with the county. The county is certainly on board. The county planning office is also certainly looking to promote those very uses that we have in Somerset County, and certainly elsewhere on the 202, 206 corridors as they go through Somerset County. Certainly, eventually, once the consultant is on board, there will be a number of public visioning sessions, and even before that, I would imagine bringing the consultants in to talk directly with the planning board. So once again, you've heard me say it before, stay tuned and be prepared for further discussions.
Thanks, Mayor, for bringing us up to date. Appreciate that.
And Delicious Heights will be at the Farmers Market this Saturday, and Colin Hickey will
Oh,
be.
nice.
How many more weekends, Larry?
We're going all the way through November, man.
All right.
Good.
We were approached by a number of vendors who actually had said that in COVID, that they have customers who are more comfortable going to farmers markets and doing their shopping in outside environments than they do going to the supermarkets. So a request was made if we could keep it going. And we had a farmers market committee meeting, and it was unanimous, you know, let's do it. So
that's great.
Want to find me and Colin? Find us there on Saturdays instead of sweating in 95-degree weather. We'll be freezing in, you know.
Get some of those 55-gallon drums, Mayor, and some wood to keep us warm. But we'll be there.
Doing it Saturday after Thanksgiving, right?
That's right.
I believe you have a movie coming up. You want to talk about that at all?
So we're supposed to have a movie tonight.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
It's a program that the rec department is running, but with the threat of a storm, I'm not sure if we actually got rain.
It's pouring right now.
Oh, it's raining.
No, it was a good call by the rec department to cancel tonight's movie. Mm-hmm. And the movie will be rescheduled for tomorrow, which is supposed to be beautiful. And that's Back to the Future. And just, Colin, do you know if there's reservations or it's just show up?
Show up.
Show up, bring your lawn chairs, bring your blankets,
yep.
Bring your bug spray. Something organic so you don't, so Bill Kibler doesn't yell at us about it.
Oh, man. You don't have to take that,
but
Bill.
bring your bug spray anyway. Bring your heavy duty stuff. Just keep it away from the moths in River Road Park. And that's moving forward. Oh, Bill, while we have you, I'm going to hijack you for a second.
Please do.
Those damn lantern flies.
Lantern flies. Yeah.
They're here in Bedminster. Bill, you know, we're going to have the Environmental Commission talk about it at a different meeting, but, you know, Bill is an expert on all things outside.
You're overselling me, Mr. Mayor, but
So what's the concern with the lanternfly, and what can we do about it?
Well, in a nutshell, they're an invasive pest. They're not, as you know, they're not native to this area. They're not native to North America, for that matter. They're very destructive, especially with agricultural crops. So they can do real significant harm in farm areas, real significant harm to landscaping, shrubbery, that sort of thing. They can do some damage to trees, especially when the trees are younger. And they're spreading awfully fast. The good news is your timing is pretty good, because as the weather starts to cool down, it will be easier to capture them. Right now, the only way to deal with them is frankly to try to capture them and kill them. And I'd be happy to talk to the Environmental Commission and give them some suggestions. As the temperatures start to cool down, as I said, they'll be easier to capture. They're getting to the time of the year when they'll start laying their eggs, and that's definitely when we want to get a hold of them and kill them as soon as possible. Problem is, they're pretty. They're cute.
Yeah, they're crazy looking.
I live in Califon. I'm coming to you live from my basement in Califon, and I had one right on my back porch the other day. It drove me nuts.
So,
And since I've got the floor and you put me on a spot, I just want to mention, I'm very jealous of Mr. Collins, who seems to be at the Presidio in San Francisco right now, which is way better than my basement. And I know he's on the West Coast because the sun's still up out there. So
I'm dreaming.
that's a good dream.
all right. Thank you, Bill.
You're welcome.
Thank you. All right. Paul, I think we want to talk about the Brown application.
Yes, I wrote a completeness letter the other day. Obviously, if you read the letter, this is an application for variance on a single-family home for setbacks. It is a kind of an oddly configured lot in that it's on the west side of Hackle-Barney Road, north of Pottersville. It's in the R10 zone. They thought it was in the R1 zone. They did a zoning table accordingly. And they also did not submit their engineering plan, which they thought they had submitted. And there's a lot of information on that I noted as incomplete. So the engineer actually contacted me the other day and said that he got my review, he would be amending his plans, and along with the architect would resubmit. So that's not ready to be scheduled yet. It is incomplete.
So this is the, what one might say is the last house in Bedminster. As you go up Pottersville Road, moving away from the firehouse, I think this house just transacted earlier this year. And, I think others may have thought this was in either Chester or Long Valley, but this is right. And that's Hackle-Barney Road at that point?
Yes.
So this is right before the Sportsman parking lot on Hackle-Barney Road, surrounded by Hackle-Barney State Park.
Okay. All right, so we won't schedule that now. We'll wait till further. That's all we have. So if I have a motion to adjourn.
Motion adjourned.
Seconded?
We are meeting next week, correct?
We are meeting next week. Yes, right. We have
So Lamington Farm Cottage and
Lamington
pickleball
Farm,
application.
Okay.
Yeah, Lamington Farm.
Paul, where's Bedminster Farms on their? I saw Janine just handed me a package. I assume.
They just dropped off documents the other day. I have literally not even opened them yet, so I can't tell you what they are. But if you recall, they said that they were going to renotice before they came back. So my recommendation is let me look at the plans, and then we can talk about renoticing for them potentially by next week, having them. Maybe next week we can reschedule them for October.
But you did get new plans, Paul. You got?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, and thank you. See you next week.
Good night.
All right.
Night.